Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're unpacking a concept that is absolutely crucial to our modern world: sustainable development. We're going to start with a bird's eye view of some pretty massive global challenges, map out how our world systems actually interact, and then follow a strict, ticking countdown for one of the most resource-heavy sectors on the planet, the chemical industry. So here's our roadmap for today. We'll hit defining sustainable development, a world in crisis, three interconnected systems, transforming the chemical industry, and finally, the countdown to 2050. Let's get right into it. Section 1. Defining sustainable development. The 1980s origins. To really understand where we're going, we first need to look back at the 1980s, when the environmental movement really crystallized this idea. Introduced in 1980 by major players like the UN Environmental Program and the Worldwide Fund for Nature, the core of sustainable development is basically a giant balancing act. You simply can't look at economic growth without equally weighing these social and ecological impacts. It's all about maintaining essential ecological processes, preserving genetic diversity, and making sure we're actually evaluating both the short-term and the long-term impacts of everything we do. This idea brings us to a really powerful quote from the 1987 Brundtland Report. "The Earth is one, but the world is not." That is such a heavy thought, right? It really hits the nail on the head regarding intergenerational equity. It highlights the heartbreaking divide between those of us consuming the Earth's resources at a completely unsustainable rate and those who are far greater in number, by the way, who are forced to live with hunger, disease, and early death. We share one biosphere, yet we operate as totally divided worlds. Section 2. A World in Crisis. Global Environment, 2002. To truly grasp why this balance is so crucial, we have to look at the sheer scale of the damage outlined in the 2002 Global Environment Outlook Report. 2 billion. That's the staggering number of hectares of soil classed as degraded by human activities. To put that into perspective, that is an area roughly the size of the US and Canada combined. And even more sobering, about a sixth of that land was pushed entirely beyond restoration. Gone. This next number is equally devastating: 2.8 billion. That was the number of people living on less than $2 a day back in 2002. You see, we really can't separate the degradation of the Earth from the poverty of its people. They're literally two sides of the exact same coin. And the human cost behind these metrics? It's just massive. At the time of that report, carbon dioxide concentrations had hit 367 parts per million, which was a 25% spike since 1850. Half of the world's rivers were seriously depleted or polluted. We were looking at 1 billion people lacking access to safe drinking water and 11 million children dying every single year from preventable causes linked to poor nutrition and sanitation. The takeaway here is that extreme poverty and environmental collapse are deeply inextricably tied together. Section 3. 3 interconnected systems: social, eco, and economic. So how do we actually map out a solution to these massive overlapping crises? Well, it's like a giant puzzle. Sustainability sits right at the intersection of our social, environmental, and economic systems. They completely depend on one another. It's only right there in the dead center, where all three overlap, that we find what researchers call the sustainable regime. You just can't achieve sustainability if you ignore even one of these core pieces. Let's look a little closer at how this loop works. The economic system draws vital materials and energy from the environment, and it uses labor from society to generate goods and services. But there's a catch: it creates waste. The environment is what provides the clean air, water, and land to sustain us in the first place. If our economy isn't carefully managed, its catastrophic waste emissions will completely destroy the very environmental resources it needs to exist. It's a fragile loop. This holistic, systems-level thinking is exactly what tens of thousands of delegates hammered home at the 2002 Johannesburg Summit. And this wasn't just politicians in a room. We're talking NGOs, businesses, scientists, and youth delegates. They cemented the idea that you absolutely cannot fix poverty without addressing the environment, and you can't fix the environment without managing natural resources fairly. Section 4. Transforming the chemical industry. Okay, now that we understand the big picture, let's zoom in on a specific, incredibly resource-heavy sector. Making a massive process industry sustainable requires a top-to-bottom overhaul. We're talking labor, technology, capital, the whole shebang. But at a fundamental level, it means a massive shift in four main things: feedstocks, energy, water, and waste resilience. And why does this matter to you? Because nearly everything we use every single day, from the clothes on our backs to the phones in our pockets, relies heavily on the chemical industry. Now, within this industry, water is a uniquely complicated piece of the puzzle. It has incredibly diverse demands, from residential to agriculture. Its availability varies wildly depending on where you are, and it isn't really a viable traded commodity on a global scale. Because of that, managing local water sits right alongside feedstocks, energy, and environmental resilience as the four absolute pillars for industrial sustainability. To pull off this massive overhaul, researcher Thomas Gradle laid out a clear four-step strategy. Step 1, transition away from petrochemicals and move toward biochemical feedstocks. Step 2, aggressively limit water use to whatever the local supply can actually handle. Step 3, ditch fossil fuels for sustainable energy. And finally, Step 4, establish programs to hit near-zero discharges of waste into the environment.
Section 5, the countdown to 2050. A 50-year window.
A strategy is really only as good as its timeline, right? Based on a report by the U.S. National Research Council's Board of Sustainable Development, Gradle suggested a 50-year target to achieve total sustainability. Think of this 50-year framework as a rapidly ticking clock for human ingenuity. Time is very much of the essence here. So, what does this countdown actually look like? The industry is facing some strict, non-negotiable milestones. By 2035, organic chemicals production needs to hit a 50-50 split between petrochemical and biotechnological feedstocks. By 2040, they need another 50-50 split, this time for sustainable versus fossil fuel energy. And the ultimate goal? By 2050, the entire industry must closely approach absolute zero waste discharges into the environment. As we look at the immense scale of these global crises alongside these strict, looming deadlines, we're left with one vital question. Do we actually have the societal willpower to commit to this sustainable transition before time runs out? The framework is there, and the science is completely clear, but the choice to act? Well, that's entirely on us. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer today. Keep asking questions, keep looking at the systems around you, and I'll see you next time.